Paul Heyman has stood beside the most dangerous men in professional wrestling for 30 years. He has survived every storm, navigated every threat, talked his way out of every impossible situation with the specific genius of someone who has never not once found himself truly without an answer. Until March 2, 2026, when Seth Rollins stopped listening to the words and started delivering consequences instead. What is up, Suplex Rumble Nation? I am your host, and today we are breaking down one of the most audacious, most strategically loaded, most personally significant moments Seth Rollins has delivered in his entire 2026 chapter. On March 2, 2026, Seth Rollins attacked Paul Heyman, not a performer, not a rival in a scheduled program, not someone who had been physically threatening him. Seth Rollins chose to go after Paul Heyman, the special counsel, the most strategically significant non-competitor in WWE, in a move that communicates volumes about where the visionary's head is, what he is building toward, and precisely how far he is willing to go to make his most important statement of 2026. Subscribe if you are new. Notification bell. Drop a comment right now, one word describing your reaction when you saw Seth Rollins go after Paul Heyman. Let's go into every extraordinary layer of this moment together. Before we talk about what Seth Rollins did, before we unpack the how and the why and the seismic implications of this specific attack, we need to spend real, dedicated time establishing exactly what Paul Heyman represents in the WWE ecosystem. Because attacking Paul Heyman is not the same as attacking any other person in that building, and understanding why requires understanding what Paul Heyman actually is. Paul Heyman is not a manager in the traditional professional wrestling sense of that word. The word manager implies a support function, someone who stands at ringside, provides occasional interference, cuts hype promos, and otherwise orbits the performer they represent. That description applies to dozens of people who have held the manager role across WWE history. It does not apply to Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman is a strategic architect, a chess player operating in a sport where most participants are playing checkers. His role in the careers of the performers he has aligned with has never been supplementary, it has been foundational. The difference between Paul Heyman's presence and absence in a performer's career is not the difference between having backup and not having backup. It is the difference between operating within a carefully constructed strategic framework and operating without one. Think about his track record. The careers that have reached their absolute ceiling under Heyman's guidance. The championship reigns that have been extended, protected, and elevated by his specific combination of verbal brilliance and behind-the-scenes strategic intelligence. The opponents who have been outwitted not in the ring but in the spaces between matches and the promo exchanges, the contract negotiations, the positioning decisions that determine how a championship program is framed before a single bell rings. Paul Heyman's value to whoever he is aligned with is not physical, it is psychological, strategic, and institutional. He is the most dangerous unarmed person in WWE because his weapons are words, plans, and the specific kind of intelligence that cannot be defended against with physical strength. Which means that attacking Paul Heyman is not an act of physical bravado, it is a strategic statement of the highest order. Seth Rollins did not attack Paul Heyman because he wanted to hurt him physically. He attacked Paul Heyman because he wanted to communicate something specific to someone specific that words alone could not adequately convey. To fully understand why Seth Rollins made this specific move on this specific night, we need to understand the complete picture of his 2026 journey up to March 2. Seth Rollins entered 2026 as one of the most compelling character studies in professional wrestling. The mystery attacker exposure had stripped away the carefully managed perception architecture that the visionary had been operating behind, revealing the full extent of his calculated disruption of the Raw roster and generating a combination of fan responses that ranged from outrage to reluctant admiration. The subsequent Elimination Chamber events, his reunion with Roman Reigns inside the Steel, the Forbidden Casket discovery backstage, the extraordinary emotional Raw segment where the Tribal Chief hugged him in front of the world had accelerated his character evolution at a pace that required significant psychological processing. Seth Rollins in the weeks following the Chamber was a man in genuine transition, moving from one identity to another. From the isolated visionary operating behind layers of calculated concealment to something more open, more allied, more connected to the brotherhood that had always been his most authentic foundation. But transition in Seth Rollins' world is never simple, never clean, never free of the specific complications that come from being someone who has spent years operating strategically in a landscape full of people who remember every strategic decision you have ever made against them. Paul Heyman remembers everything. That is his specific superpower and his most dangerous quality. And whatever Heyman had been communicating in promos, in backstage conversations, in the specific way his presence in the Raw environment acknowledged and responded to Seth Rollins' new alliance with Roman Reigns had been building toward a response. On March 2, 2026, that response arrived. In Seth Rollins' specific, unambiguous, physical language. Let's reconstruct the attack itself, because the specific details of how Seth Rollins went after Paul Heyman on March 2 are as significant as the fact that it happened. In professional wrestling, method communicates meaning, and the method Seth Rollins employed tells a complete story. The segment began with Paul Heyman in the ring, operating in his natural habitat, microphone in hand, arena attentive, the specific quality of complete command over a live audience that only Paul Heyman can achieve through pure verbal presence. Whatever he was saying in the content of his promo on this night was layered with the specific, sophisticated provocations that Heyman deploys when he wants to generate a specific response from a specific person. It was landing with the precision of a master craftsman doing what he does best. The arena was engaged. Production was smooth. Everything appeared, from the outside, to be a normal Paul Heyman promo segment operating within the usual parameters of Monday Night Raw. Seth Rollins' music hit. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and electric because the specific combination of Paul Heyman in the ring and Seth Rollins' music hitting carries a historical charge that the WWE Universe feels physically. These are two people whose connection to the most significant power structures in WWE history makes every interaction between them loaded with potential consequence. Seth came through the curtain with the specific energy that experienced wrestling fans immediately recognize as meaningful, not the theatrical, showman entrance of a performer playing to the crowd. The focused, directed, deliberately purposeful walk of someone who has already made their decision and is simply executing it. He reached the ring. He entered. He looked at Paul Heyman with the specific expression that precedes significant action in Seth Rollins' vocabulary, not anger, not excitement, not the performed emotion of a character working a segment. Something colder, more deliberate, more final. And then he moved. The attack was not extended. Seth Rollins did not linger or perform. He made his statement with the specific economy of a man who wants to communicate one thing clearly not put on a show. The message was physical. The message was personal. And the message was directed not at Paul Heyman the performer but at Paul Heyman the strategist, at the intelligence behind every threat Seth had identified as requiring this specific response. Paul Heyman went down. The arena erupted. And Seth Rollins stood over the most dangerous mind in professional wrestling, not triumphant, not theatrical but composed. The specific composure of someone who has just executed exactly the plan they intended to execute. Now the most important analytical question this attack generates. Not what happened, but why Paul Heyman specifically? Why this target? Why this method? Why this night? Seth Rollins is the visionary. Every significant action he takes is preceded by analysis, the specific, comprehensive strategic analysis of someone who processes the wrestling landscape in terms of leverage, consequence, and long-term positioning rather than immediate gratification. When Seth Rollins makes a move, the move serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It always has. Attacking Paul Heyman serves several simultaneous purposes that Seth Rollins would have identified and evaluated before making his decision. First, it sends a message to Brock Lesnar. Paul Heyman's connection to Lesnar is the most significant professional relationship in his current WWE chapter. A physical attack on Heyman is a communication to Lesnar that operates completely outside the verbal register, one that says, with absolute clarity, that Seth Rollins is not managing this situation from a distance. He is willing to go directly at the infrastructure that supports the most dangerous man in WWE. Second, it sends a message to Roman Reigns. Specifically, it sends a message about what kind of partner Seth Rollins is in their reunited alliance. Not a passive